Okay, it's time for another quick quilting motif, and today it's the figure of eight. Now, figure of eights are a really lovely, quite elegant motif. They're very, very easy to quilt, but remember, always start by drawing your motif. And when you're drawing your motif and you're practicing drawing it, it's most helpful if you practice drawing your motif at the scale that you want to quilt it. So for example, if you want to put this inside a 2-inch border, draw out a 2-inch wide strip and practice the motif within that. If you want it 3 inches wide, that will feel slightly differently when you're quilting it. So practice drawing it at 3 inches wide. If you're using a figure of eight to fill a shape in, it goes really nicely in a hexagon. Draw out that hexagon, full size, or even a strip of them, and again, practice quilting within that motif. And then when you actually get to your quilt, it's going to feel very natural. So let's look at the figure of eight. So again, this is one that you'll find very, very easy to draw from left to right, but when you try doing it from right to left, it's a totally different ball game. So we'll start at the top, and here's our figure of eight. Sometimes called wishbone quilting because it looks a little bit like a chicken's wishbone. And again, you can vary the density. So have them thin and close together for quite dense quilting, have them wide apart for less dense quilting. You can also really, really increase the size of the loop. Again, this increases the density of your quilting, and you can even have them so that they touch or almost touch. And again, you're getting very different looks from the same pattern. But as I mentioned at the start of this video, when you try and quilt this from right to left, it feels totally different. It's a different path. So it's really helpful. Here's a top tip. If you've already drawn it out, try tracing your finger over the top of the motif that you've already drawn, but in the opposite direction. It will get the motor skills going so that when you come to quilt it, it feels natural. If you don't believe me, try doing it without practicing and see what kind of a mess you get into. And you can also practice this from top to bottom and bottom to top. I mentioned using it to fill a hexagon. So if I just quickly draw a rough hexagon, very rough hexagon, but this looks really nice quilted through. So for example, like this, quilted through that hexagon. And if you had these maybe running in a line or in a granny's flower garden or whatever, you could still work in vertical rows, and that looks really, really elegant. So it's a great shape for filling in parts of your motif, background fill, or for borders as well. I think this is one of my favorite motifs. It looks so elegant, and it's so easy to change up the density of your quilting. And make sure whenever you're doing free motion quilting, you've got a darning or free motion quilting foot on, and you've also dropped your feed dogs. We're going to start at the top. Presser foot down and needle up. Lift your presser foot and bring your work forward. Pull on that top thread and just pull on that bottom loop. That's your bobbin thread. We want to make sure that we've got the top and bobbin thread on the surface of our work so that we don't end up with a bird's nest. Okay, we're just going to take a few little stitches just to anchor our thread, and then we're away. I always think it's useful with figure of eight just to trace the design with your finger before you start stitching so that you know where that first line of stitching is going to go. Okay, it's in my head. It takes 3 or 4 times, sometimes more, and then we'll start to stitch. So for elegant wishbone quilting, small loops on the end of widely spaced quilting lines. This is a quick one to stitch, and it really covers a lot of area very, very quickly. So you can see there already a really nice bit of wishbone quilting. Let's change up the density a little bit by increasing the size. We're going to make them a little bit closer together as well. And again, this is the kind of thing that I'm just going to do by eye. But before we ever get near our quilt, we want to make sure that we have drawn this, not just once, but 10 times, maybe even 20. And that has really changed the density and the look of the quilting pattern, but it's still just a figure of 8. For our last example, let's take the loops even bigger so that they are almost touching. So really close together now. Creates a very, very dense quilting pattern. And of course here I am using rounded loops, but your figure of 8 don't have to have rounded edges. We could have triangular figure of 8 quilting or wishbone quilting. Same path, but much more angular rather than smooth and curvy. So have fun experimenting using our latest quick quilting motif figure of 8.